So let's talk about this new album. It's called Primordial Arcana, and it came out on August 20th of this year. Tell me a little bit about your tensions with the album and how the songwriting process for this album differed from your previous album, Thrice Woven.
Well, I'd say two main differences. The first is that this is the first record where Cody has been involved in the songwriting from the jump. And I think that you hear a freshness on this record, a new dose of vitality and energy. And part of that I attribute to Cody's influence. He's just another man with another musical perspective. He, in his mind's eye, sees a different record than I do or Nathan does. And it's through the synthesis of our three visions that the album is created. The other important distinction between Primordial Arcana and previous albums is that this is the first record that we've not worked with an outside producer. All three of us co-produced the record, but I did the majority of the engineering. I'm the one sitting at the control desk, and I did the mixing on the record. And so this is, a very new process for us, especially for me, because in the past I've been used to the comfort of being able to sit back on the couch and let Randall Dunn, the producer we've worked with in the past, handle the minutia and the technical details of this or that, fix the million problems that emerge during the recording of a complex record such as this one. But this time I was the guy in the hot seat who had to solve all of those technical problems and at the same time still be fully in the magical and energetic flow of the record, and making sure that the heart intention of the music is always held as the jewel that we are focusing our energy and attention on.
I would definitely like to talk more about the recording of this album. Before we get there, you mentioned this is the first album that Cody contributed music to and was part of the songwriting. Can you tell me a little bit about how you met Cody and how he became part of Wolves in the Throne Room?
Indeed. I first met Cody a long time ago. We used to live on this old farm, and we would host concerts in the old barn there. And Cody was playing in a band called Fall of the Bastards. They were based, I believe, in Salem or Eugene, Oregon. They were good. They were like sort of a blackened crust band, but we didn't really connect then. And then in 2010, I had a wedding ceremony with my bride. It was a very epic heathen event. Hundreds of people were there, and Cody was at that wedding. And I don't know, I think it was on that day that we somehow opened up an energetic connection to each other. In some way, he was, a seed was planted that then grew into a very deep and rich and beautiful relationship. And starting in around 2010, Cody was with us on the road as the touring guitar player. Nathan and I would do all the work of, being the band, holding the space of being Wolves in the Throne Room. And Cody would just come with us on the road. But then as Thrice Woven was being recorded, almost at the tail end of that process, we all just realized that it was time for Cody to be fully initiated into the family, because he'd been with us for so long and because he really is on the same wavelength as Nathan and myself. For instance, Two Hunters and Diadem of 12 Stars, Rick Dolan played guitar. And I will never give him short shrift because he wrote a lot of riffs. He drew the Wolves in the Throne Room logo. He contributed a lot of energy to the creation of the band, but there was always a sort of spiritual disconnect in what we wanted the music to be about. And with Cody, that's not there. There isn't this split between me and Nathan on one side and then the other guy. Cody is fully integrated in Wolves in the Throne Room, and that's because we have the same spirituality. We have the same desires about what we want to create and call forth with our music.
How do you describe Cody's contributions?
Well, he's a great riff writer. He is good at two kinds of riffs, actually three kinds. He can make stuff that's extremely complex and almost baroque in its sound, 3 or 4 intertwining guitar parts. He excels at slow stuff. His previous band before Wolves in the Throne Room was called Aldebaran, which was extremely slow funeral doom, cosmic and astral in its orientation. And he's good at just a simple direct riff as well. He's good at writing these riffs that don't have three or four parts. It's just one riff that really calls in the power of lightning. And he is a good balancer, I suppose. Nathan and I can both be quite reactive in our orientation, and Cody does a good job at just kind of like holding a middle ground and being able to assimilate and meld the perhaps more fiery dispositions of Nathan and myself.
You talked about this album being the first one that you recorded at your own studio, Owl Lodge Studios in Olympia. And you mentioned some of the technical, or having faced a few technical problems in engineering the album. What was the biggest challenge in handling the recording yourself or yourselves?
Well, I would say that making records is all technical challenges. There's always something, there's always something broken. There's always something that could be better, especially in a new studio like ours, where we've done a lot of work in here, but not a complete record. And so pushing sound through the hardware for the first time, it's like a maiden voyage of a ship. It's like a shakedown cruise. And so in some ways, we were kind of building the studio as we were working, which was challenging. We actually had to pause for a few months between doing the tracking and the mixing because we hadn't planned on mixing the record here. We built a tracking studio, and it was our intention to send the music we recorded to a mix engineer, which is in this modern time a very common way to make records. And we did so, and we got the mixes back from a very excellent mix engineer, and it was obvious immediately that it was not going to work. The record that we had crafted so carefully and put so much magic and feeling into had been destroyed, because I realized immediately that there's just no way that someone who's outside of our cult could work on the music with us, because we're working with very subtle feelings, as every artist and musician does. And for someone to just get a bunch of files over the internet and then be expected to keep that feeling and that magic intact is an impossible task. And so we realized, oh shit, well, we have to mix the record ourselves, which I had not expected to do. And so it took a few months of work on our studio, on both the hardware end, getting some more equipment, doing a lot of work on the acoustic treatment in the room in order to have a space that would be up to the task of doing the mix. And I'm quite glad that it turned out this way, because now the studio is fully operational to be able to do anything from the initial demoing all the way through to mixing and mastering.
What was the biggest lesson you learned in recording and engineering this album yourself?
I think that it wasn't a new lesson, but it solidified what I already had learned from my mentors, that the most important thing is to trust your initial instincts. And indeed, that's the only way to work. If you let yourself be pulled around by the thinking mind of, oh, is this good? Is this bad? Are the fans going to like this? Is this part too different from things we've done in the past? These sort of like mental loops will lead you into disaster and failure. And so the path forward artistically is to keep the consciousness, keep your power and your energy in your body. Use the mind as a tool to solve technical problems, to work effectively. But the mind is a tool that is wielded by the heart and the body.
There are a lot of elements, musical elements, keyboards, atmospheric elements that weave in and out throughout the album. How difficult was it to integrate these elements into your music and to find the right level as these elements play out throughout your songs?
Well, soundscapes are kind of my specialty. So that's my favorite part, actually, is it's a process of ornamentation. We record the drums and the guitars first, and we make sure that the song stands on its own without anything else. No vocals, no keyboards, no bass guitar, no mixing tricks, no nice reverb on the snare, just the raw riffs and drums. And once we are confident that the song stands on its own as a song, the process of production begins. And this is where the music becomes very three-dimensional and very architectural. I perceive each song as a space, as a building, as a cathedral that I enter in my mind's eye. And every element in the mix, whether it's a cymbal over here or a synthesizer over there or a guitar riff over there, is a physical object within the cathedral. And the process of creating all of these artifacts and then putting them into their proper place is accomplished by recording them, by layering them in the sonic spectrum, and then placing them within the space of the album, which is mixing. And so it's a bit of a magic trick, perhaps, to have this creation of architecture that is expressed through sound. And I certainly have an architectural experience when I listen to the music, and especially with headphones, because I don't mix exclusively for headphones, but I certainly am acknowledging that a lot of people enjoy listening to music in headphones because of the immersive experience. I am able to enter that space, enter this cathedral that we created in the recording studio, and say, yes, there's that one golden bauble that I left there on the central altar. Oh, yes, over here is a shaft of golden light that's coming through the stained glass window. It's a great pleasure to go back into these spaces that have been created in the past and experience them again by listening to the music.
So you made reference to Randall Dunn, who recorded some of your earlier albums, and in the past you've referred to him as a mentor. Can you tell me what you learned from Randall as far as producing and engineering albums?
Yeah. He is an engineer or producer who is primarily focused on the spiritual energy of a record. He's not a particularly technical person. Like, he's not a person who thinks in terms of frequencies or this piece of gear or studying up on different recording techniques. He's a person that holds a space for a record to be created, which is a magical act. It's like creating a container, a protected container within which the act of creation or art can occur. And there's a lot of tricks to do this. There's techniques to hold the space where creativity can unfold. And they're kind of hard to put into words. It's subtle things, and I think that every artist finds their own way of doing it. But it's crucial to do, because if as an artist you are just open to everyone else's opinion or everyone else's idea, well, then your music will not be yours. You'll just be creating a pastiche of other people's ideas. And that's not what we've ever done. We've been very focused on the idea of creating music that is purely arising from our own hearts and from our own vision. And to do that, you have to be protected. You have to create the boundaries around yourself and around the record, the space, both physical, energetic, magical, spiritual, where the record is being created.